don't allow yourself to be so comfortable that you're scared to move forward. It's awesome to fail. I've done it so many times. Uberbot crashed and burned, and I lost my house. I lost every penny that I had. It was the darkest time. It was terrible. But every little bit of all of it was necessary to get where I'm at today.
Welcome to Second Act Stories, a podcast that profiles people who have made major life and career changes and are pursuing more rewarding lives in a second act. I'm your host, Scott Merritt.
And I'm Scott's co-host for today's episode, Andy Levine. Scott, one of the things I absolutely love in life is a really good chocolate chip cookie. And I gather you got to experience this when recording today's episode.
I did. I had what I would call the best chocolate chip cookie I've ever had, but you don't have to take my word for it. There are some really high-profile media outlets that have called Gideon's Bakehouse the best cookies on the planet.
All right. So Steve Lewis, who founded Gideon's Bakehouse, I gather he has a rather unusual title that he's given himself at the store.
Yeah, he does. So, yeah, he's the owner and creator, but that's boring for a business card. So Steve's business card says that he's the sublime prince of the esoteric order of cookie.
This sounds like a rather creative soul.
Possibly the most creative person I've ever met, and I work in a creative field.
All right. Well, let's hear his story. Steve Lewis of Gideon's Bakehouse.
Originally, I'm from Staten Island, but I've been in Central Florida for over 20-ish years now. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a musician, and I wanted to own a comic book store. So I started on the musician part of it first, and was classically trained in guitar and piano. I started playing as a musician professionally at 14. And that was the path that I was on, and I worked in that business for quite a long time until I had a botched surgery on my hand that made it very difficult for me to play. I went to college and got a degree in vocal music because I couldn't really play anymore. It was just a matter of singing more every day. I think in college was when I realized that music wasn't going to work anymore. You know, I worked on my voice a lot, and that was great, but I wasn't passionate about being a singer.
So college then kind of showed you what you weren't going to do versus what you were going to do.
Yeah, it really kickstarted the idea that I needed to think about what would make me happy moving forward, and I jumped back to that child in me and started looking at the idea of opening up something that was more pop culture based. I have a love of sharing the things that I love, and there's no better place to do that than in a shop that's just all about, comics, movies, music. It was a lot of fun.
With his dream of being a professional musician dashed, Steve refocused his attention to his other passion, comic books. But when he got his first real job in a comic book store, he realized his vision didn't align with the reality.
But when I started working for comic book stores around town, I realized I really didn't like comic book stores. I disagreed with them perpetuating the stereotype that comics were for nerds and kids, and I saw it as quite a different artistic medium. This was way before the Marvel movies started to mainstream comics.
Right.
So I worked for shops around town and learned that business and learned what it meant to run a business. And then eventually opened up my first attempt at small business. It was a little art gallery in Winter Park, which is a really high-end, lovely part of Central Florida that turned into like an art gallery / comic book store called Uberbot, and it was way ahead of its day.
And the experiences that I've had in comic shops, which I've had quite a few.
Yeah.
I used to collect comics as a kid also, and then into my very late teens. So there is a very definitive sense of community.
Absolutely. Uberbot was the best example of that at that point in my life, where I was very proud to have brought together an artistic community. It wasn't just about comics, it was about art, and we hosted so many art shows. I would ask comic artists to come to Uberbot to show off their personal artwork, not their comic artwork, to give them that opportunity to express who they were as artists outside of their work. And at the time, no one had ever done that before. So it was a very groundbreaking little store that attracted people that were into comics, but even more so attracted people that just had creative minds, that were into art, into something new that was happening in the community. But it was actually there that I started to give away these cookies that I had been working on for 15 years. So the cookie part of my life is just a hobby.
At this point, Steve only considered baking a hobby, but his cookies were a hit at Uberbot. In the meantime, Uberbot was being hailed as Orlando's best addiction.
You know, we did things there that you would only find in New York City, for example. So we brought a lot of artistically what was popular in the underground art world. We were very big into something at the time called urban vinyl or designer toys. That was a scene that's almost disappeared now. I miss it. I'm talking about it, like getting a little nostalgic. I think when we first opened up, the focus was more on Japanese animation and comics, which is more of my background and what my head was all about. But designer toys were really new and just took over. So I started focusing more on the artistic side of Gideon's Bakehouse.
So you have had a bit of a second act here, because you transitioned from somebody who had a highly creative, unique retail shop to somebody who's got a similarly creative, unique retail shop, but now you're a baker.
Right now, I don't need to educate people as to what I do. It's cookies, cake, and coffee. It's pretty easy.
Some might consider becoming a baker Steve's second act, and they'd be right. Others might see his conceptualizing and executing a creative retail vision that's simply unimaginable to regular folks as his second act, and they too would be right. It's the melding of the two that I really find inspirational, and I had to know how Gideon's came about.
So I do really collect old books, and I'd say maybe 25 years ago, I was at an estate sale, and I bought a collection of old Victorian books, and in that box was an old cookbook that a little kid was writing in, almost like a faded diary, making little notes and doing little doodles. And it was obvious that he wanted to be a baker when he grew up. And the name that was scribbled at the back of that book was Gideon. And the date the book was published was 1898. Michael Reyes is the artist that does all the illustrations for Gideon's Bakehouse. And he had his first art show at Uberbot. And I remember talking to Mike about if I ever opened a bakery, not because I was planning on opening up a bakery, but just as almost a branding exercise, because we both have that branding brain. And that's where he had said, hey, don't open up your bakery, open up that kid's bakery, because he remembered that book. And it brought it all back. And from there, everything really started to fall into place as to what Gideon's Bakehouse would be, what it would feel like, what it would look like. And it was a pretty easy path from there, from a branding standpoint.
How would you explain Gideon's Bakehouse to somebody who's never experienced it?
The first thing that I talk to people about is that we make cookies that take over 24 hours to prepare, cakes and cold brew that take over 24 hours to prepare, that are all done by hand. The only piece of equipment we use is a mixer. I am not a trained baker, so the way that I've come to my recipes is a different path than your average baker, because I don't know what I'm doing. So the end result is it's a unique product. The second part of it is the physical space itself. Here at East End Market, the physical space is part of an ecosystem that is East End Market. But the new location at Disney Springs gave me the opportunity to be singular for the first time and really create escapism. So I don't ship, I don't deliver, I don't have plans to do those things because I want people to physically walk into a Gideon's Bakehouse, either to enjoy the community ecosystem that is the East End Market or get the uniquely immersive experience that is Gideon's at Disney Springs. Uh, and it's a tattered Victorian transportation to the past, and it's unique is the best way to describe it.
The first thought that I had, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you this, is, I felt like I was walking into Hogwarts.
Sure.
It makes sense that you're affiliated with Disney. There's just, I mean, I would say that you've probably put in what they would coin Imagineering.
Sure.
And that was just born from your mind, right?
Yeah, it actually existed in my mind before I was familiar with Harry Potter. But I do very much enjoy that aesthetic. I was drawn to that because I enjoyed it. Haunted Mansion, big inspiration for us. The East End Market location has a chandelier that used to hang in the Haunted Mansion, hanging over our cookies that we were able to get our hands on. So there's the little homage, and there's a little cast iron gate at our entrance that used to be in the cemetery, Haunted Mansion. But there's an artist named Edward Gorey that Mike and I are both fascinated with. And the original question was, what would a bakery look like if it were designed by Edward Gorey? And in a sense, that's what Gideon's Bakehouse is today.
We've all been to probably hundreds, thousands of bakeries.
Sure.
And nobody has really created an experience of going to the bakery.
Right.
So where does that come from?
I mean, I am obsessed with experience as a whole. That's a word I use constantly. And what I love to tell people is, because I say it to myself, create something that is unique, that creates a memory for other people. If I just had your typical chocolate chip cookie that was just larger or whatever, and it's not even just about dessert, just everything in general. Whatever your business is, how does it stand apart from what everyone else does?
So is Gideon's Bakehouse about a creative concept or the world's best cookies?
One can't exist without the other. So it really is equal to me. It's equal parts dessert, equal parts branding and immersive experience, and equal parts community. So when you go to a Gideon's Bakehouse at Disney Springs, for example, there's people that I hire to just stand outside and talk to you in line. And there's no requirements of what they should talk about. They're not salespeople. If you walk up wearing an Avatar: The Last Airbender t-shirt, they're probably going to ask you what nation you would be a part of, cartoon nerd speak. You come up with a Star Wars shirt, we're going to talk about the latest episode of Mandalorian. That's building community.
Now, you told me that that Gideon's Bakehouse is the first single person owned business.
Now, this is impossible for me to know for sure, but as far as I know, I'm the only single owner inline store business with no partners or investors, which it sounds lofty. It's probably really stupid.
One of the things that should give you a hint about how unbelievable the cookies are at Gideon's Bakehouse is how long people are willing to wait to get them.
It could take up to 5 hours to get inside. Is the norm? Yeah,
5 hours.
Yeah, the weekends it's theme park, so there's a lot of people out there, and I'm not a large bakery. We see a lot of people every day, but we can't see everybody, and we operate off of a virtual queue system most of the time, where you sign up to get a text to return to the line. Our line can't be so long that it blocks other businesses, so we have to keep it at a certain length, which is pretty long, and it takes a little planning. And that sets an expectation that is hard to meet, and I described it as being people waiting in line to wait to see what's behind the door, like they would wait to walk into a ride. And that's exactly what happened. Like, you can't see the inside of Gideon's Bakehouse unless you wait in the line and we open the door and let you in.
You have to commit.
Yeah. You can't just, if somebody comes up and says, I just want to peek inside. That's not part of the experience.
When you reach a certain creative plateau, it's very necessary to make sure that every aspect of the consumer touch point is is what it needs to be, right?
Yeah,
So it's got to fit the vision.
I keep thinking that I'm going to run out of ideas and that the burnout is going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. There's still there's always a new cake idea, cold brew idea, cookie flavor.
You also have part of the experience is that you have a limit on what people can buy.
Yeah, both stores are not large for the demand. So the original store is 286 square feet. There's only so much storage that space can have. So we, from probably week one of Gideon's Bakehouse, had to institute a 6-person limit. There are 6 flavors.
Six cookie
6 cookie per person limit. So, and then the cakes are a limit of 2 per person. And without that, we would be done by 1 o'clock every day. And the same exists at Disney Springs. So it's the store is built to hold roughly 7,000 cookies a day, and that's what we could move through in a day, and often do.
Extremely creative people aren't usually fans of the business side of the business. So how do you balance those parts?
I have a supportive team that allows me to stay away from the business side of things to be creative when I need to be. There will be weeks where I'm having financial meetings, I'm with the bank, I'm with my accountant, I'm with my own team at my office. So I'm obsessed with keeping a clean, simple, honest business. So that will usually happen for a week or 2 at a time. And then I jump back into the creative, and I'm doing the photography, and I'm making posts on social media, and I'm working on recipes.
If your first act was as a retail entrepreneur, would you classify your second act as a baker or an experienced designer?
I've never thought about that before. I think of it as the third act because the music would be the first life. Mm-hmm. The art gallery was the second. In a lot of ways, though, like I said earlier, the music is like the cookies to me. The art gallery is the cookies to me. So to me, Gideon's Bakehouse is the musical side of me and the art gallery in me, all wrapped into one. But it's the evolution of everything that I've done in my life. So yeah, I think of Gideon's as being the third act, but I would not know how to classify myself. I've never really thought about it.
And you probably shouldn't.
I think the true goal in life is to experience who you are as a human being, and trying to make sure that the person you are is authentic to you and not a product of your environment.
That's a really impactful statement. It's something that I hear from people who are successful, that once you realize what's authentically you, that's where success kind of lives. What's next for Gideon's Bakehouse?
That's a question I get a lot. And obviously what everyone wants me to do, were I a product of my environment, I would have 10 other Gideon's Bakehouses by now. I would franchise, I would have investors, I would have partners. I would grow. But Gideon's Bakehouse is so authentically an extension of who I am as a human being that I don't think I can duplicate myself over and over and over. I'm not financially motivated, so there doesn't seem to be a reason for me to open up a bunch of stores. And logistically, it's not really possible unless I automated what I do. Between my 2 stores, I'm less than 1,600 square foot of retail, and it takes 160 employees to meet the daily demand. Opening up another store requires more hands, and that will multiply.
What would you advise for somebody who is maybe listening and looking for some sort of inspiration to take a different direction in their career?
I'm a big fan of taking chances, but that's easy for me to say because my only responsibility in life is my 2 cats. I opened up Gideon's Bakehouse with $800 in the bank. You don't need as much as you think you do. I don't know anybody. I'm not networked at all. I didn't get where I was because I knew a bunch of people and because I'm part of that crowd. But I often do tell people, The biggest piece of advice I can give to others is not to take other people's advice, because I got a bunch of it when I started, and in hindsight, it was all wrong, and I listened to none of it. Oh, and every single person thought I was crazy for tearing down an existing bakery to build another one that fit my brand, and it was 100% the right decision. Because that was part of what opened the door to my relationship with Disney. Because there's a story to Gideon's Bakehouse. There's a story to the name. There's a story to the look. There's a story to the cookies. And they love that. People love that. It's not a two-dimensional thing.
So you have this amazing track record of creativity, creating award-winning experiences. Let's say that there's somebody out there who said, I want to open a retail establishment of some sort, whatever it is, flower shop, or a convenience store, whatever it is. How do they level up?
It's like if you cracked open my brain, it would look like Gideon's Bakehouse. It's not a theme to me. It is very much what's inside of me. So I would dig with that person and learn who they are and try to help them express that in an immersive way. And there's no answer to that question outside of search inside of yourself and feel confident that you're creating something that is unique to you. I haven't had every chocolate chip cookie in the world, but I've never had one like mine. I feel pretty confident that it's a pretty unique experience.
Well, is there anything else that you would add to the conversation here that I didn't ask?
Don't allow yourself to be so comfortable that you're scared to move forward. It's awesome to fail. I've done it so many times. Uberbot crashed and burned, and I lost my house. I lost every penny that I had. It was the darkest time. It was terrible. But every little bit of all of it was necessary to get where I'm at today.
First things first, I tried 6 different flavors of Gideon's half-pound cookies, and they were amazing. Aside from baking the world's best cookies, Steve Lewis might be the single most creative person I've ever spent time with. And that creativity has driven every aspect of his journey, from musician to retail entrepreneur to baker to experience designer. Although I'll never muster the level of creativity that oozes from every one of Steve's pores, he did inspire me in several ways. Here were a couple of takeaways that I had from my conversation. Number 1, authenticity drives success. The meticulously crafted experience of visiting Gideon's Bakehouse works so well because, according to Steve, it's authentically an extension of who he is. The same applied to his previous ventures. Number 2, embrace failure. The path to success is littered with failure, but failure is what gives you the experiences you need in order to succeed. And number 3, financial motivation can stifle creativity. Everyone thought Steve was crazy for executing his vision for Gideon's Bakehouse without considering the financial aspects of the business first. It's tough to relate to for most of us, but when money isn't the motivating factor, authentic creativity can really flow. Andy and I are always on the lookout for new people to profile on Second Act Stories. If you'd like to suggest a candidate, we'd love to hear from you. Just visit our website at www.secondactstories.org and click on the Nominate a Guest box at the top of the homepage. We hope you'll keep listening. There are more Second Act Stories just around the corner.